Hi, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development, and we are live on Let's Just Read at this time. We have a special guest today, and I'm just going to share a little information on our guest before we actually introduce her. As you can see, she is willing and able and ready to be with us in this episode of Let's Just Read. Her name is Phyllis Leavitt, and she's an author and psychotherapist. Her experience comes from being or having a master's degree in psychology and counseling. And she also co-directed a sexual abuse treatment program called Parents United in Santa Fe, New Mexico until 1991. She has published two wonderful writings, one entitled A Light in the Darkness and the other Into the Fire. And today her focus will be on a third publication entitled America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. So let's welcome our guest, Phyllis Leavitt, to Let's Just Read. How are you, Phyllis?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me here today.
And thank you for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate you and we appreciate that you are here with us. I usually ask a question about the history of my guests, but I feel led to do something a bit different today. And I want to focus on the current scenario that exists more than anything else. Seeing that you have a passion for something that's nationalistic, but also worldwide in terms of how we're looking at the overall mental health of people and behavioral patterns we are seeing.
Yes.
But I want this to come from you personally. When you hear people speaking about stuff that bothers you, and you know that it is something that you have been speaking about for a long time, but they do not seem to get the message. Here's the question. When they hear your name, what do you want come to their mind? What is the main message that you want people to get from this trust that you are making right now?
Wow. I could probably answer that in 100 different ways. So I'm
Yes.
gonna pick
Yes.
one. Yeah, I think, what I really want to convey, among many other things, is that people are the most important natural resource we have.
Mm,
We are safe with safe people. We are not safe with unsafe people. And
yeah.
to the extent that we take care of one another, that we look out for one another, that we treat one another with love and justice and equality and compassion and good boundaries and peaceful conflict resolution skills, we have safe people. And to the extent that we persecute and discriminate and target different populations, and that we withhold resources, we are not safe, because we're creating, masses of people who are not safe for themselves, and they are symptomatic. And that's one of the gifts of good psychology, is that it really outlines that whole dynamic and what happens to people when they're not safe, when they're not treated well, and how they become unsafe for us. And in some ways through no fault of their own. And that, my hope is that we can take responsibility for ourselves and for the society that we create for all our brother and sister human beings.
Wow, Phyllis, that is touching. I can hear your passion and I can feel that you have a burning desire for something that is so much more essential, not just for North America, but I think it's global in, ter
Absolutely.
in terms of how you see the structuring of society. You said something very instructive there about the society that we create. I want you to think about a difference between what is happening now and say 20 years ago. You've had 30 years of experience working with families and stuff. What are the different challenges that you have seen over that period of time? And how have we evolved to have come to a place now where you think that we need therapy?
Right. And I don't know all the factors of why we are where we are, and I'm not going to pretend that I do know them all. But as a psychotherapist, and having worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, and having done a great deal of therapy myself, What I can tell you is that there seems to be, at least from this angle, and I think this is a really important angle for all of us to understand, that psychologically we are suffering as a collective, not just individually, from a decline in our mental wellness, and it's having severe effects on us. And the more it's not stopped, just like in a family or for an individual person, the more that cycle of decline in our mental wellness isn't interrupted and we don't get help, it escalates. And it appears that it's escalating and it's reaching in America. And I know this is happening all over the world. And some of this isn't new in human history.
Yeah.
But it's reaching the top levels of authority, influence, and control, and having a devastating effect on hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. I believe that people are really suffering, many, 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 many people, more than we know.
Yeah.
Because as a therapist, I've worked with so many people who have atrocious childhoods. Abuse and neglect is rampant in America, and I think it is all over the world. And that's not to point a finger of blame at anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Say we need help.
Okay. Yeah. It's an amazing thing when you look at so many challenges that are happening in the world, and you think about the fact that there's so many resources available,
Right.
but yet it seems to be falling in the pockets and in the hands of just the privileged few. But I'm going to leave that out for a while because I think we need to focus on the solutions.
Right.
How do you see your personal experience and the things that you would have learned from your personal experience playing an instructive and instrumental role in the publication that you just recently published? What's the
Right.
connection between the two?
Yeah. Well, what I see from all my years as a therapist and from my own experience just as one human being is that our greatest injuries that produce the worst effects in human behavior are injuries to love and belonging. People don't feel loved and they don't feel that they have a place, that they're valued. It creates symptoms. It creates pain. I think, so many Americans, for instance, and I do think this is worldwide, but I won't keep repeating that, suffer from severe loneliness and
Yeah.
a feeling that they don't matter and that the world around them doesn't care about them because we've
Yeah.
sort of lost that tribal sense.
Mhm.
I do want to emphasize that I think there are also millions of people doing amazing, wonderful humanitarian things in our country, and they don't get enough press.
Okay.
We there are wonderful people doing amazing projects with inner city children, with healthcare, with alternative healthcare that they're providing in their communities outside of the insurance system, and I could go on and on. So I really want to presence that. It's sort of like, you could have a relatively healthy body, but there's a cancer in it. And you have to address the cancer at the same time that you boost the immune system and all of the resources in the body. And so in some ways, I'm talking about the cancer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. So I
Yeah.
think our worst injuries are from love and belonging, and they're not solved by violence. They're not solved by the kind of criminal justice system that we have right now at all. In fact, they're perpetuated. And
Yeah.
so if the worst injuries we have are to love and belonging, and that's the short version, then that's what we need to heal. And I want that to be, my hope is that we understand that people are not intrinsically bad. Bad things happen to them. Their conditioning is terrible and they're
Yeah.
symptomatic. And what we know in the world of psychology is that those symptoms are a call for help. They shouldn't be a cause for blame and shame, but we're still operating under that paradigm that they're just bad people out there.
Wow. So, Phyllis, how do we get to a place where there's enough information, enough education going out there so that people would understand the dynamics of what you just said. So many people see themselves as victims, and
That's right.
they think that they have done something wrong, or as you say, that they are bad, and that's not the case. But how do we get that message out to them? How do we get that information that's so vital for a better frame of mind out to them?
Well, that's the reason I wrote my book.
Uh-huh.
Because I think, a book can have more influence than just one person talking to a few people. And I'm not alone. I'm one voice among many, but I do really want to emphasize what you just said. We
Mhm.
need education. We
Yes.
need to educate people about our psychological functioning, because I think it's really not understood. In the world of psychology, we don't advocate that people fight it out. We
Mm.
help people reconnect. We
Yeah.
help people heal the wounds that have happened to them. And that's what I would like to see as a national agenda. And it begins with education. I totally agree with you. You're probably familiar with a man named Brian Stevenson. I don't know if you are, but he works with I think his whole thrust of his work is with people who have been wrongfully incarcerated. And
Okay.
one of the things that he said that I love, and I quoted this in my book, we are not the worst things that we've ever done.
Mm. Yeah.
Not.
Wow.
There's an essential person inside every hurting human being that is
Yes.
untouched by not only what they have done, but what has happened to them. And the best therapy unearths that essential person and gives them, the freedom to express themselves and healing from the wounds that have overlaid that essence. And I want to convert that into a national conversation.
Mm.
America is not the worst things that we've ever done
Yeah.
either,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. That's right. So, Phyllis, how did you come up with the name America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis? Where did that inspiration come from, and how challenging was the research and the editing and, to get it to the final product?
Oh, it was enormous. I've
Mm.
actually started the idea for this book probably 20 years ago,
Mm.
and felt it was like beyond my capacity to write. And then finally, I just felt like I had to write it. And I got an amazing writing coach and editor to work with. And
Okay.
let me just say that was invaluable,
All right.
invaluable, both for the coaching and the editing, and also to work with someone who saw my vision. I think we need that. We need each other. We need collaboration. And I just want to acknowledge you, because one of the things that I've found doing podcasts is that there are amazing people like you out there offering a platform for a new way of looking at things, for
Yeah.
healing, for hope,
Yeah.
for new ideas. And we need each other. And
Yes.
that's one of the things that's such a problem in America today is we have this crazy attachment to the idea of our independence individually and worldwide. And
Yeah.
it's simply not true.
Yeah.
It's simply not the case, and it's destructive. But just to go back to what you were saying. So actually, the title of my book originally was Out of the Office and Into the World. That's how
Mm.
I saw it. And I think that's the name of one of my chapters now.
Okay.
But the title actually came from a collaboration of different input that I got from my editor and
Uh-huh.
from some of the people I did podcasts with.
Okay.
And that's how it emerged.
Mm. Thank you for sharing, Phyllis. I appreciate that. Wonderful. So I'm going to share something with you now,
Right?
and I want to get your feedback because I believe it's coming from a place of love
When I became a
and concern.
psychotherapist and I had a private practice and worked one-on-one with individuals, children, families, couples, I never imagined that I would be taking the world of psychotherapy and psychology out of my office and into a larger arena. And if you had told me that I would be doing that in my 70s, I would not have believed it. And yet, everything that I've learned from the world of psychotherapy and psychology has shown me given me an inside view of what's going on in the family of America from a dynamics, from a relationship dynamics point of view, from the point of view of what we know are relatively healthy family dynamics and human interaction dynamics, and what are unhealthy and destructive dynamics. And I couldn't help but see that what goes on in the individual family, for better or for worse, is exactly what goes on in larger institutions and in countries like our country, for better or for worse.
So I'm going to stop it there and I want to ask you something. Do we have a deeper concern when we look at what is happening with the family, that it goes from the family into the social cycle, the workplace, when we are out there interacting with people, and eventually reaches into organizations and certainly into governments? Does the main problem, Phyllis, start from the family?
I think it's dual. And I try to address that in my book, because I definitely think that families in America are, to a large extent, in crisis. Pressures economically, the pressures racially and discrimination, and what women go through, and what minorities go through, and the limited access to, healthcare, and all the things that we could name. And I think that as it reaches higher levels of organization, business, and states and communities and our federal government, then there's an enormous influence that comes down from the top, and they're interplaying right now in a way that I think is dangerous. Because just like parents, if parents are dysfunctional and abusive, they really affect the lives of their children. So the people in charge of our country really affect all of our lives. And to the extent that we're not healthy in our own homes, or we're being hurt in our own homes, then we bring that back out into the world. And often those are the people that we elect, because many people who have been hurt identify with the aggressor. And many people who have been hurt also become powerless. Those are two sides of the coin, big sides of the coin, of untreated dysfunction and abuse in families. Some people identify with the aggressor, and some people become helpless and powerless because they've been so overpowered. And both are susceptible to identifying with very aggressive leaders, because it gives them a sense of power that they didn't really have. And I talk about this in detail in my book. I go into these dynamics, and the healing is starting with education, and then looking and exploring what are the dynamics of a healthy family. And they have to do with love and belonging. And, I can't emphasize this enough, a commitment to peaceful conflict resolution. And we need that in our country just as much as we need it in our homes. So right now, in answer to your question, I see those two things as playing off each other. And the healthier we become as individuals, hopefully that will ripple out into our larger society, because that's what we have control over.
So let me just continue.
Of course, I wrote this book because I wanted to shine a light on what's happening for worse in the country, and try to bring some of the compassion and understanding, deep understanding, of all I have learned working with so many people and doing so many years of therapy myself. I wanted to bring the light of all I have learned to our country, because I'm hoping for health and healing for our country, and really for the world. But I focus on America because that's where I live. So given that, I never imagined that I would enter conversation from a psychological point of view in the political arena, and yet that's where I found myself. And it's an interesting paradox, because psychotherapy and psychology by themselves are completely nonpartisan. Psychology, in fact, the best psychotherapy, really is helping us bridge the great divides, not reinforce them. It's all about coming back together, whether it's coming back to our true selves or healing relationships. And so it really doesn't have a partisan agenda of pitting one side against another, or proving one side to be right and another wrong, or acting out our greatest disagreements on one another. And yet, it's important to talk psychology in the world of politics. I looked up the word politics in the dictionary, and what I found was that one of the definitions that's really helpful to understand is that politics are simply the process by which we make agreements about how we're all going to get along together. That's it. And so, of course, the world of psychology has a place in the world of politics. And that's what I'm advocating, that we need to bring our psychological understanding into the politics we have in our country today, so that we can help heal the great divide between us and the violence erupting all around us with the best of what we know about how to heal human relations.
Okay, great. Now, I love that because that approach is really holistic and it's from the top down, more or less. So, do you feel that you are being heard and understood? And if so, are you the only voice that is coming from this particular perspective that we need to address? Or are there others that are now beginning to say, yes, we understand where Phyllis is coming from. We need to get on board and support her because it affects all of us?
Well, this is what I would say. You know, I've had an amazing response from people that I've reached out to be on their podcast. So if that's any indication that people are hungry for this kind of message, you know, I think that's true. I don't think I'm the only person by any means. You know,
Okay.
I may have my own individual spin from
Yeah.
my experience as a therapist and as a client. And I think I've put things together in a really succinct way, but I
Mhm.
think I'm not alone by any means. You know, there's amazing people out there, Brene Brown, Gabor Mate, and in terms of politics, from what I have read, Marianne Williamson, who is running for president, is very much in line with my thinking in terms of the way that she talks about her political views and her political agenda. So yes, I think I'm one voice among many, and there's some beauty in that. Like, every voice is needed. Your voice is needed. My voice is needed. Everybody who has something to say about making this world a sustainable place. And I really mean that, sustainable, because I think we're headed in a direction where it may not be sustainable. Everyone who has a contribution on whatever level, we need every one of us. And you know, one of the reasons why I wrote my book, one of the many, is because I hear people saying it's too late. You know, the human race is done for. What
Oh,
can I do? I'm just one person. And I want to say we can all do something. If
yes,
you affect one person in a better way, you've done something to make this world a better place.
that's right. That's right. Thank you for sharing, Phyllis. I truly agree with your philosophy and your belief. I want to look at the approach that you're doing. And if I can add anything holistically to it, I want to ask you about sporting in terms of we have so many different areas in sports where we see some of the athletes struggle themselves with mental illnesses and behavioral patterns and so on. But we also have a situation where we have dieting as a concern. How do these two things play a role in taking us further away from a place where we need to live a more balanced life as far as that holistic approach to mental wellness and behavior are concerned?
Well, and again, I don't have every answer. I'm going to
Mhm.
say something kind of general to begin with, and that
Yeah.
is that in this country, we don't have a psychological kind of environment socially that
Mhm.
just loves people for who they are.
Okay.
We have such a thing about if you're fat, if you're thin, if you're tall, if you're, you know, if your lips are big enough, if your butt's big enough, you know, there's such a focus on the way you appear and it having to be okay and having it to be even better than the next person,
Mm.
or, you know, competing, you have to be number one. You have to starve yourself, to look us. Do you know what I'm saying? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we don't have a culture that values us as individuals. And I know I felt that way growing up. I felt like I had to fit in some way. Um, and they never felt like it did, and I think most people don't feel like they do, because
Mm,
what they really want isn't just to fit in and have, the bigger lips. What they want is to be loved. What they
yeah.
want is to be accepted. And so, I think that's part of the whole message is, in a healthy family, we love diversity. We honor diversity. We value the different contributions that people have. And it doesn't matter so much what you look like. It matters who you are.
Yeah. All
So
right.
I think some of those things that you're talking about, are the extreme end of people just not
Mhm.
feeling like they're good enough.
Mm, wow. I think it's a challenge really when you think that you have to live up to a society that looks at you from an outward expectation and does not place the value upon who you, the original unique individual, really is. And it reminds me of a term that we use, we brandy about, called imposter syndrome. And
Mhm.
I've had some people who came to me having those challenges. I had one client who had been at a job for 25 years, Phyllis, and was never one day satisfied or fulfilled. She was just going through the motion. And I told her, you were just killing yourself from the inside out. Maybe what folks saw on the outside and their expectations was different, but at the end of the day, if you are not fulfilled with the life that you're living, then you are really not living at all. I say that to ask this: what are some of the challenges that you would have faced with individuals in terms of their struggle or wrestling with themselves to live up to the expectations that they thought the world had for them?
Well, I think it's very common. I think it's very, very common that people just feel like they can't be enough, they can't do enough, they can't get enough, and they can't get enough recognition. And I think one of the big things that's really missing, and you tell me if I'm answering your question here,
Sure.
um, but I think one of the things that's really big that's missing is just basic acknowledgement of one another.
Mm,
There are people who work, and I've worked with them, people who work in jobs in offices for years and years, and they never feel appreciated.
yeah.
What they get is what they didn't do, and they didn't do it fast enough, and they didn't do enough of it, or somebody else, gets hired for the raise ahead of them, and they just feel completely unseen and invisible. And it's a terrible trauma, actually, to feel invisible and unappreciated. And when I've worked with clients, couples, one of the things that I find often happens in a long-term relationship is that people have stopped acknowledging each other. They've taken each other for granted, and just introducing, thank you for that. You did a great job. That was a wonderful dinner, or thanks for doing the laundry, whatever it is, makes all the difference. We all want to be seen. And I would call it good food. We
Yes.
good food, and part of good food is what we get, that mirroring from other people, that we're valued, that
Yeah.
we
I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate it from that personal perspective. I think there's so much value in there. Phyllis, I want to read something for you, and I think it ties in so much with what you're saying. It's amazing that I have this information before me, and I read it again before you came on, and it touched me and moved me. So I'm just going to share it with you, and you're going to give me a feedback.
okay.
Although I had prayed for God's help, I was totally unprepared to have that prayer answered. On that day, my personal journey unexpectedly became the doorway into another realm. 3 months later, this voice returned and wrote through my hand as I was writing in my journal. All I had to do was ask a question, and divine source would be there immediately with answers that blew open my educated East Coast mind and the limited pictures of healing I had hoped to achieve. I was told what the sole purpose is behind all our struggles and how we participate in the evolution of consciousness for ourselves and all others through the transformation of the exact challenges we face. God's light did not rescue me from anything lying in my path, but I had new resources to deal with the life I was living.
Hmm.
Wow. Where did that come from?
Well, so I'll share with you that I had some significant abuse in my childhood.
Wow.
I buried it. I had no
Mm,
memory of it.
mm,
Um, and it was like a dark shadow over my life. I was exactly what you were talking about. I just felt like there was something wrong with me and it must be my fault. And I was a flawed person and I couldn't be happy and I couldn't find love. And I felt like there was this whole life inside of me that was stuck in there and couldn't come out.
wow.
And after I had my third child, I was pretty much, like at that turning point where you're just like you're in a dark hole and you really need to come out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went to therapy at that point, and I actually had started to remember something before that,
Mhm.
but I didn't even really realize exactly what I was remembering.
Okay.
I went to therapy. I did a lot of therapy.
Mm,
And I recovered some of the memories of what had happened to me. I did a lot of crying. I went through a very dark night of the soul,
mhm.
which I think a lot of people go through.
Yeah.
And I always kept a journal. And since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a writer. And I always kept journals and I wrote poetry and I wrote little pieces of experience. And I was keeping a very a journal during this whole process of my own healing. And um, I kind of broke through one day where I had I just prayed. I said,
Mhm.
God help me.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
help me. I'm really suffering. I'm in pain
Mhm.
and I feel like I'm doing everything I can to heal and I don't know what to do next. And I
Yeah.
felt like I broke through to this very essential part of myself, which we all have in our own form, I really believe.
Yeah.
And I started to just understand from a very profound point of view that everything that I was experiencing was part of my journey. It was a painful part of my journey, but that transformation was possible through it. That
Mhm.
there, you know, and I began to go on that kind of inner journey and healing road. And the first two books that I wrote are all about that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing, Phyllis. I'm touched and I'm moved. The main thing I believe is that we need to be discoverers of ourselves.
That's right.
And I say that because I understand that there are times when people would have inner struggles that they don't want to face up to. But at the end of the day, it is so much better to truly discover who we are because there's so much value in that.
That's
And
right.
when that happens and you become connected to your true self, there are so many possibilities that opens up, Phyllis, in our lives. And you mentioned reaching out to God, and He is the creator of everything. So go back to the manufacturer. Start from there. And we can see that your resilience has brought you to a place where now you feel that you need to reach out and let the world know, hey, there's a better way in which we can see life through a lens that has hope.
Yes.
Even though it may require therapy, but there's still hope. And I
Yeah.
think that's a resounding message.
It
So,
requires
yeah,
change.
yes,
We have
yeah,
to change the lens through which we
mhm,
see each other and
mhm,
ourselves.
yeah,
And no therapist that I had was perfect
yeah,
because we're not perfect.
right,
None of us are. But
yes,
having someone there who was safe enough for me to explore what I needed to explore made all the difference in the world. And
yes,
one of the things that I think about when I say taking therapy out of the office and into the world is we can learn to be that for each other, not necessarily a therapist, but a non-judgmental, compassionate, listening
mhm,
ear.
yeah, that's right. Well said, Phyllis. Thank you so much for sharing. So we have just come to the end of this very intriguing and absorbing conversation with Phyllis Leavitt. And I just want to ask her to share her information, how you can get the book, her website, if you need for her to speak, if you need her professional services. Phyllis, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am retired from my psychotherapy practice, so I don't see individual clients now. But the best way to reach me, I love speaking. I love sharing. And so the best way to reach me for that or for any other information is on my website, which is www.phyllisleavitt.com. And if you can just sign, into my newsletter or the contact me place, and you can reach me, and I'd be really happy to talk with you, get back with you, speak if you would like me to. My book, America in Therapy, is with a publisher right now, and it's going to be published in 2024. So it will be coming out next year, but it is available for pre-order now. And so on my website, you can pre-order it. You can go to Amazon.com and pre-order it. And then I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. I have lots of talks and interviews on YouTube. I have lots of talks and interviews on my website. And I'm on, probably left one out, Instagram. The basic social media you can find me on. I try to post things that are, meaningful and valuable. I have a newsletter. If you sign up for my newsletter, you can receive that. Those are the basic ways to reach me. And I really, really want to say I'm happy to connect with anyone who wants to connect with me.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Phyllis, and thank you for putting that out there. I just posted your information on the chat, and I have a greeting from Joan Paul that said, "Good day, Andy. Blessings." Thank you. Blessings right back to you. And for our special guest, Phyllis Leavitt, in the studios of Let's Just Read. Folks, it has been a wonderful conversation and a wonderful time that we have had here. And before we leave, I just want to remind you that it is important for us to read so that we become enlightened. We do not know it all. The information is out there, the content is there, the value is there. People like Phyllis are working to ensure that we have the opportunity to get the stuff that we need that can bring value and a sense of hope to our lives. And we must commend her for that. Hats off to you for the work that you're doing, Phyllis. So until next time, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development on Let's Just Read with my guest, Phyllis Leavitt, saying, Godspeed, God bless, namaste, bye for now. Take care. Until next time.
Thank you.